Well, good morning and welcome to another Monday Mornings at Maine online edition. My name is Heather Miller and I'm an adult programming librarian here at the La Crosse Public Library. And I'm so glad you could join us for our special presentation today. We all know the transformative power literature can have on our lives. And today we have some special guests from the University of Wisconsin, La Crosse, and Western Technical College to tell us about how they are using their time and talents to help inmates in our community. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Solzbach to learn more about the jail literacy program. Kelly?
Hi, thank you all for coming. And I want to begin by thanking Heather Miller and the Public Library for inviting us to talk about these issues and what we do. I am from University of Wisconsin, La Crosse, WL, and I'm here with Matt Cashlin, who also works with me. And we do a program called the Jail Literacy Program at the La Crosse County Jail. And we also have with us Steph Gouger, who is from Western Technical, and she's going to talk about a fantastic program they have been doing in the jail called Project Proven. But before we get started, I wanted to hear from you all. Before I begin to talk about what we do with our literature in the jail, why do you read literature? And I'm thinking here more of the fiction and the poetry, but when you go to read something, what does it do for you? Why do you think that's important? Why do you want to spend your time, hours, reading through a novel? Why do you read? That's my question. And you can feel free to turn on your video or unmute yourself and just anything you want to say. Anything you want to say about why you like to read.
I guess sometimes I read because I want to learn something. I like historical novels because I like to hear about the history part of the story, you know, the historic facts about. But I also sometimes read, I think, to, my grandma said this to me one time, to forget about my own problems.
This is a really good list of like the reasons why reading is important, that we need it in some ways, not only to sometimes have that sense of escape and entertainment, but also to learn things that we might not learn in the course of our lives, to be able to experience other things that go beyond our usual boundaries. And I love this idea of other cultures and other people, to be able to experience how someone else thinks, and to use literature as a way of reflecting on what you learn and how you learn is important. And if those things are important to us, they're equally important to a lot of the folks who are in jail. And during the time that they're there, it is a time of self-reflection in the jail. There's a lot of jail programming related to thinking about psychological and behavioral attitudes, and a lot of time just spent without a lot to do, right? And so literature in that moment of contemplation, in that moment of stepping back from one's life, right, in jail, can allow for a lot of consideration of oneself, new learning, and that sense of being able to escape from oneself to even imagine how one might be different or how one's life might change. So what I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about two different examples of lesson plans where we've gone into the jail and worked with the inmates with literature. And I don't have visuals to show you what the place is like. And I bet you can imagine why, right? We can't take pictures of the people and we have to respect their privacy and what's going on there. But because I'm sure you're somewhat curious, part of that whole experience involves having IDs, going in, getting a walkie-talkie. We get in an elevator and we do have an actual classroom to work with. And we usually push the tables together and we're all sitting around in a circle. And we tend to do the lesson plans multiple times. We meet once with women and then for about an hour and 15 minutes for each lesson. And then we meet again with the men and do the lesson with them. So just to give you a flavor of what we're doing when we go and teach literature in there, let me share my screen. One of the first lessons that I did when I went in there was with the Icarus myth. And some of you might be familiar with that, some of them not. Does anybody know the Icarus myth? Anybody want to give us a quick summary of that? You're too shy. You're way too modest, I'm sure. So the quick summary is that it's an ancient Greek myth, and you have an inventor, and his name is Daedalus, and he is supposed to design a labyrinth to hold a monster. But once the labyrinth is designed and he's there with his son, he needs to get out, right? So the monster isn't there to destroy them. So he creates these wings, and he uses wax to put them together so Daedalus and his son Icarus can fly out. But he tells his son, don't fly too close to the sun, right? And you can imagine why. What's going to happen to those wax wings is they're going to melt. But Icarus can't help himself, and he does end up flying too close to the sun. He does not follow his dad's good advice, and he ends up falling to his doom. And we talk about that story and what happens there, and we put with it some other poems. And so I've got some paintings here to represent some of the other poems that we put with it, because we also look at a poem by Anne Sexton, To a Friend Whose Work Has Come to Triumph, about this Icarus story. And in this poem, here's how Icarus is described. Admire his wings, feel the fire at his neck, and see how casually he glances up and is caught wondrously tunneling into that hot eye, the sun, right? Who cares that he fell back to the sea? See him acclaiming the sun and come plunging down while his sensible daddy goes straight into town. And we asked them, like, what do you think about Icarus in this moment? And I think there are some universal things that literature teaches us about problems we all share. And this feeling of wanting to grab what's in front of you and get excited, and the addiction to that opportunity of not being able to see anything else or anyone else but what's in front of you in that one moment, is something we all maybe can relate to or have been through. And we talk about how Icarus, this version of Icarus, takes Icarus's side, right? Understands where he's coming from. But then we read another poem, and this one is called Waiting for Icarus by Muriel Rukeyser. And in this poem, I didn't have a picture to quite accurately present this, but we have Icarus's girlfriend, the one he was supposed to come back to, and he's not there for her. And she is reflecting and saying, he said he would be back and we'd drink wine together. He said everything would be better than before. He said we were on the edge of a new relation. I remember mother saying inventors are like poets, a trashy lot. I remember she told me those who try out inventions are worse. I remember she added, women who love such are worst of all. I have been waiting all day, or perhaps longer. I would have liked to have tried those wings myself. I would have been better than this. And so in this poem, and I'm only reading you parts of it so you can get a sense, the perspective totally flips, right? Here we are asked to consider the same event from a different perspective in terms of, wow, that person's actions had an impact and affected other people. How do we relate to her position? How does she feel as someone who has been affected by her beloved's decision? And this is in part what literature does for me as a person, and what I try and think about it in terms of my students, right? How through literature can we inhabit multiple different perspectives, begin to see not only our own, version of events, but be able to recognize how everyone might have a different experience of that same moment. And how do we learn to empathize and understand why other people react in a different way? And the last slide, the picture up there in the middle, a painting by Bruegel, is one that we use with the last poem we looked at in this unit, related to W.H. Auden's poem about Icarus, in which you have a boy who just goes splashing into the water. And if you look by the big ship, you can see a couple of little legs sticking out. But the whole community just sort of turns away from the disaster. They decide not to look. And we also talk about, like, how does society and how society reacts to us influence how we think about ourselves, and what obligation and responsibilities do we have, right, as a society to help people out. And I think that, that one poem, that one lesson can help us walk around a single problem and look at it. And I think this is something that is not just about the inmates in the jail, although it does help them see different perspectives, but about all of us trying to reevaluate how we think about our actions and our decisions on all of these multiple levels. And the short other lesson plan, I'll just quickly briefly kind of lay out for you. This is one where we brought in some music, we brought in some jazz, we brought in some blues, and we listened to Billie Holiday, and we also read a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks called Queen of the Blues. And in this, she is saying, she's describing Mame. Mame was singing at the midnight club, and the place was red with the blues. She could shake her body across the floor, for what did she have to lose? And this poem describes a woman who's had a really tough life, but man, she can sing it out, right? And it's interesting to think about the ways in which jazz, the blues, poetry provides us a chance to sing our story, right? To say it out. And blues as a music form is this cathartic experience, this transformational sharing of emotions. Because when you put the emotions out there in song or on paper, it allows you to process them, right? And connect with other people who understand that emotion. And definitely when we did that poem, Queen of the Blues, with the women, they were like, yes, she gets it. She is powerful, and that she's able to transform the difficulty she's had in her life, being all alone, not having a father who loved her, and able to do something with it. The men, when we read that poem, had a kind of reaction of thinking, wow, where were the men in her life? Why weren't they there for her, right? And it was an interesting way to think about how we deal with pain and what kinds of responsibilities we take for it. I've also got the terrific Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald here, and we did a little bit of their music as well. A song called Tenderly, if you know it. It's just beautiful and sweet. And we talked about then another love poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, and this one is called The Old Marrieds. And with the Old Marrieds, the love is there, but it's also not maybe as sweetly romantic as you would think. And I'll just read this poem, it's really short. The Old Marrieds. But in the crowding darkness, not a word did they say, though the pretty coated birds had piped lightly all the day. And he'd seen the lovers in the little side streets, and she'd heard the morning stories clogged with sweets. It was quite a time for loving. It was midnight. It was May. But in the crowding darkness, not a word did they say. And we talked about like all the kinds of ways in which love manifests, right? Like there is love that feels like you're $1 million bucks 10 feet off the street. But when you really know a person, how does that love change? What kinds of love gets expressed in the silences of things you don't even need to say? And again, really fantastic interpretations of the difficulty of love and whether that has its own benefits too, and the ways in which we think about those relationships. And so a lot of times when we bring in literature to the jail and talk about it, it's talking about the literature, but it's also talking about all these things we go to literature for, to learn about other perspectives, to learn about ourselves, and in some ways to be able to escape ourselves for a few minutes too, but also to process those feelings, to feel someone else shares it and we can think about it together. And those kinds of lessons have created terrific opportunities where you get to see people, and I'll stop sharing here for a minute. You get to see people figure out how to disagree with one another. What if I have an interpretation, this other person has a different interpretation? How is it safe to say, you know, I see it a different way? Those are skills I have to keep practicing, right? And particularly in our cultural moment right now. How do we have those conversations with each other? And I learn from them most of the time that I'm there. They will share interpretations of poems that I have never thought of before. They are able to bring new perspectives to me in my life. And I often find myself just amazed at the way that they can take like a line from Langston Hughes about something sugaring over with sickly sweet, and get that idea that sometimes the dreams are so sweet that when nothing happens, they just crust over. And they're able to talk about those things in ways that I think we sometimes in the Midwest have a hard time really talking about it. But those emotions and those reactions are important. And those transformative experiences they have with literature also transform me. And I feel sometimes I get a lot more out of it than they do. So we also do some creative writing with the jail literacy program, and I'm going to let Matt talk about how we do that. And the inmates don't know this because we don't want to necessarily, it might feel a little bit intimidating. Sometimes I feel a little intimidated around Matt, but he is an award-winning writer, and you in the community should know that you have such a fantastic person here in your neighborhood. But he has, with his short story collection, Last Words of the Holy Ghost, which I highly recommend reading. I think it rivals James Joyce's Dubliners. He won the prestigious Catherine Ann Porter Prize and the Zona Gale Award for Short Fiction from the Council of Wisconsin Writers. And his most recent novel, which you should check out, is called Our 13th Divorce. So I'll let Matt talk about what he does with the inmates of creative writing.
Okay, hi. Yeah, well, thanks, Kelly, for that plug. I'll pay you for that later, as we talked about. But it's nice of you to say. It's such a pleasure for me to work with Kelly and all of our colleagues. I think we have like 6 other colleagues who are rotate with us going into the jail to offer these programs. And, you know, as she said, we get so much out of it ourselves. And I continue to be amazed by what all of the inmates have to offer with some very challenging material sometimes. It's really inspiring to me to hear their stories. And mostly, you know, I think I don't know, I picture myself as being a listener, an advocate for them to tell their stories, where perhaps they, I don't know, don't get very many opportunities outside of the jail to have their stories really heard and listened to very well. So I continue to be inspired by the stories they tell and by what they have to contribute. They have a way of connecting their own personal lives to so much of the material. And they're, you know, very honest about things. And as Kelly said, they're sort of comfortable disagreeing with each other and having some really good conversations, perhaps in many ways that our students feel uncomfortable doing, you know. So it's really a delight to work with them. And yeah, after a little while, we encourage them to write a little bit, very often based on a prompt that we might give them, maybe based on the material that we're teaching on a given day. And before we go in, we usually spend about an hour sort of planning something that we hope is meaningful for them, that we want to share with them. And Kelly gave you some great examples, you know, sometimes music, sometimes poetry, sometimes nonfiction. And we write along with them as they're writing their pieces, and we share and then they share. And, you know, it's right there on the spot. And sometimes that's an intimidating, challenging thing to do for my students, at least. But they all rise to the challenge and they write down what they whatever they want, what they believe to be honest and pure. And these stories, again, are pretty amazing. And at one point, we learned of a program that is nationwide called Emancipated Stories, which I was turned on to by a mutual friend of mine and the New York City playwright, Alexandra, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Hudges, a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright who began this program, Emancipated Stories, because her brother was incarcerated. And so she wanted everyone in the United States who was behind bars to donate a one-page story to this project, Emancipated Stories. And there's an Instagram site for it and a website. So we started going in and encouraging inmates to write at least one page. And, you know, the stuff they came out with was, again, just a very wide range of material. Some of it would make people cry. Some of it would make people laugh. But the value of that, I think, again, if we're talking about the value of literature and the value of stories, was for them to hear each other's stories, was for them to be a very supportive audience for one another, you know. Sometimes the men who, I don't know, as Kelly mentioned, you know, sometimes there's some intimidation going on, and that culture in America, not just the Midwest maybe, but for the men to have a stiff upper lip and not to show a lot of emotion, you know, and to be kind of tough guys. Sometimes they would read their material and tear up, and then they would give each other some fist bumps after they hear each other's stories and say, hey, that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing, you know. And the women have so many valuable stories to tell as well, and they empathize with each other. And so I think this is the value of stories. We all have them, you know. I think our culture, even in this moment, relies on stories. It's how I think our civilization can continue to get to know each other. It's how we get to know each other as people. Who are we? Where are we from? What have we survived? And what have we endured? What do we continue to try to cope with? You know, and these are people who have, you know, some really valuable stories to tell. So yeah, I don't know, Kelly, if this is a point to maybe share an example of one of those. Okay, yeah, great. So this was a prompt that we got from the Sun magazine. Some of you may know the Sun magazine. It's a monthly that comes out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It's a really good magazine. They have fiction, poetry, essays, but also every month they have a section called Readers Write, and based on a particular theme. So one month, the theme was write something that you would respond to that matters, like what really matters. So we brought that to the jail and we gave them some examples of what some of those readers had written. And we asked them to write a little piece. What really matters, you know, what would you respond to that? And there was such a powerful, wide range of really great stories that they read. And this one was published on the Instagram site and actually got some national attention. People were teaching this and reading this in other programs in other parts of the country. So maybe we could just read this and you could get a feel for the kind of story that was being written and shared. So Kelly and I think are going to alternate paragraphs here. It's just one page, but I'll start. We'll do a tandem piece on this. So, and I think this was written anonymously. That was a choice they could have too. After they signed a consent form giving us permission to share it, they could choose to either publish their names or to be anonymous. So I think this was anonymous. So it begins, what really mattered that night is that I was scared and anxious and angry, and I felt betrayed. I was scared for him, for us, for our babies. So I searched our whole house, the bedroom, the closet, the bathroom, the cupboards. And that night I found it, his bubble, his dope. And what really mattered is the anger took over. It raced through my body. The room started spinning. It knocked out my breath. I needed him. They needed him. He needed us. And without even thinking, I picked up my phone. I punched in his number. And he said, hello.
I couldn't control it. And I started yelling that what really mattered is that he was done. I found out his lie and he couldn't hide. I told him I flushed it. I told him I smashed it. I still couldn't stop. I made sure he heard me. My voice lifted up. I cried and I asked him what really mattered. 9 years we had spent working and working and working and fighting to protect them and love them. We pushed bad shit away, even people we loved, so they'd never feel pain.
Finally, I paused, my voice giving out. And finally, he spoke. I was ready for screams and fuck yous and cunts, but what really matters is those didn't come. His voice was so soft. He quietly said, you and our babies. What really matters is just you and them. You are all that I want, all that I need. I was scared and anxious, alone and angry. I felt myself go. I thought you would leave me. He paused. He said, what really matters is that you still care. You didn't give up. You searched our whole house, the bedroom, the closet, the bathroom, the cupboards. You found it and flushed it and smashed it. Thank you so much. I want to be done. And what really matters is I need some help. He kept talking. He said, can I reach for your hand? Will you help me climb up?
Without hesitation, I whispered, yes. He said, thank you, again, then hung up the phone. I sat there just thinking. The room had slowed down, but what really matters is that I felt robbed. All my hurt and pain had now become his. I yelled and I screamed and I still wasn't heard. Then what really mattered were his pipe and his dope were still by the sink. I picked them up, I packed the bulb, then I took a hit.
So that's one really powerful example of so many powerful examples of the kinds of writing we get when we're in the jail. After which, I mean, it's important to say again that they write this after we've talked about literature and after we've talked about the value of stories and writing, and then they write their own. And I don't know what else to say about this. I mean, I think part of why these stories are so good is that they have permission again. I would like to think so, at least, to share whatever is vulnerable for them, and that it takes a lot of courage to reveal these stories, and that they have a safe space to do so. You know, with each other and with us, I hope. And so these are the sorts of things that we hope literature and writing can produce, you know. So yeah, I mean, we could talk a long time about this, but maybe it speaks for itself, you know. Kelly, what do you think?
Do you want to let me check on the time. Well, we should turn it over maybe at this point to Steph. And we do have another one we could read if we need to, but I want to make sure that I know Project Proven has a lot going on too.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear about it.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say, oh my gosh, I like that. That was just amazing, that story. And I just wanted to say that Emancipated Stories, I just looked that up as you were talking on their social media, and that's a really cool thing. They have an Instagram actually, so I'm following it now. But what we do in the jail, so I work at Western Technical, and I've been in the jails working in a couple of county jails here for the last probably 6-7 years. Project Proven has been a program for even longer than that. But to speak to that Emancipated Stories, while it's on my mind and I don't forget, the Wisconsin DOC, which stands for Department of Corrections, the Wisconsin Department of Corrections actually has a creativity contest that we promote. The Western promotes, and we actually we are kind of like the liaison of getting the entries in, and then there's actually a contest, and there's a bound published book with all of the winning entries from around the jail and prison systems in Wisconsin. It's reading that story that you just shared and looking at that Emancipated Stories social media, it just reminds me of what sorts of entries you will find in that book. the inmates that win, I've had actually students that have won, they actually get sent the publication. They bind it together. It's just a paper copy, but it's really beautiful because it has not only poetry, short stories, but it also has art as well. And if you've ever worked in jails and prisons, you will know that some of the art that comes out of the walls is actually pretty incredible as well, not just the writing and the poetry. So I just wanted to speak to that right away. I kind of feel like my PowerPoint's kind of drab and boring, and I think I might just not use that and just kind of just speak to you, just kind of just off the hook. But going back to this started as a Department of Education, a federal grant. And Western actually wrote the grant and won. And so it was $1 million grant probably 7 years ago. It started as that. And what makes it really kind of interesting is that reentry programs in general are common in prisons. But what makes it really kind of these programs, a reentry program in jails, county jails, is that the typical length of jail stay is 12 days. So the fact that this program is offered in a jail setting is what makes it unique. And there's not many jails across the United States that offer programs like this. So Project Proven is in 3 county jail. Actually, now we just started a 4th. So I'll kind of go through those. La Crosse has been the longest. La Crosse County Jail, we've had the longest relationship with. I was hired about 5 years ago to expand it. So there was an expansion to the grant, and that brought the grant monies to Trempealeau County and Monroe County jails. So Trempealeau County Jail is in Whitehall, Wisconsin, and the Monroe County Jail is in Sparta, Wisconsin. Now this fall, we just expanded to Jackson County Correctional, which is a really awesome partnership as well. So we just have started that partnership this fall. So let's see. We are there in the jails every day. Okay, so the difference I think between UWL, which I will say, speaking from experience, is just an amazing program that the inmates, it's highly respected, and the inmates absolutely love to know that they're able to be chosen to be a part of that program. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So it's really, really, it's a great opportunity that you guys go in there and give the inmates that opportunity, because I know they just really feel, really proud to be a part of it. But with that being said, Project Proven in Western is in the jails all day, every day. Okay, now with pandemic and COVID, we have made it work. So actually we've just pared it down now. So there's only one instructor versus a team of us going in there. So the whole concept of Project Proven is we try to align our services. So it's not just, the educational services. We also provide the community outreach and partnerships, which is huge. So like connecting with drug and alcohol help, housing help, resources to help them when they get out of jail. So we try to make connections and build a rapport while we're there. We identify the educational needs. So we help students finish their high school diploma and get their GED, HSED. So that's just one part. And then we also have a whole nother part that's integrated with the high school diploma. So part of a HSED, the requirement requires you to have an employment class along with that. So what Western has figured out and kind of prepared is a curriculum that's not only provides that employment class for credit. So the inmates can actually earn college credits while they're there. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how can they do that in only, you know, a lot of times they're only in and out, you know, for a couple of weeks. It's a great question, great thought. And I'll speak to that. The whole thing is what they start in the jail, they can continue when they get out. So what's really awesome about Project Proven is it's not just in the jail. It's not just a program in the jail. We connect, we have case managers and instructors that connect with the inmates when they get out. And that is a huge piece to what makes Project Proven such an awesome program, is because that connection and the relationships that they're building within the jail are also continued when they leave. And that connection is through Western Technical College. So we help them get jobs. We work with employers in the area that connect them to jobs and meaningful employment, with jobs that are paying well. We help them we are references to them. We help them build their resume, cover letter, all of those like more technical writing skills. So that's kind of a little bit. We also have what's called a job club, which is the connection. That's kind of more of the class at Western. Right now it's virtual and it's all via social media. But we connect. So like if they've only had a couple of classes towards the 3 college credits, they can connect when they get out and continue the classes, either virtually or in person at Western campus. So they become students at Western when in the jail. Okay. So we give them a literacy test, and it being that it's a grant, it's funded through those, they're called TABE tests, tests of adult basic education. And they need to take that literacy test. It's kind of like the test, like when you were in K-12 and the CAT and the Iowa test, it's kind of like that test, but for adults over 18. And it's a way that we track those TABE tests go to the state, and that's how we are kind of the accountability with it. But we also track who's getting employed, promotions that inmates. So we keep our spreadsheet. We follow students. So whether they're on the job, we keep connected with them through resources. And then if they become students at Western, for some, it's going to college. They want to connect with a certificate or a tech diploma or some sort of associate's degree at Western. We help them with financial aid. We help them get connected with, computer resources. We have what's called care funds that help with specific like computer access and other needs based with like internet and stuff. It's called care funding that Western earned through the COVID pandemic. So those support things are so important to helping students be successful, because so many of them are getting out. They don't have the educational, or they don't have the community, I guess, the built-in supports that you and I all have, we take for granted, whether it be, the environment that you're in, the housing situation that you're in. Some people are homeless. So really connecting and figuring out, what are those basic needs that need to be met in order for you to be successful in a job or school. So the COVID pandemic has, only kind of like the disparity has only kind of just been accentuated from, people in poverty, but we're really trying to work extra hard to help make some of those things accessible for people. But I also wanted to say, speaking of library and books and all of that, all of the people on our team, and just there's lots of really people at Western that are really just, it means the world to them. So we actually have a fund, a jail fund that we contribute to, and we have bought over the years. We have a jail library, a Western jail library housed in, I have one in the Monroe County Jail because I'm solely run the Sparta proven. But we have a whole jail library full of all sorts of books, and we put them on, it's like a library cart that we can roll in in where our classroom is and roll out. And we have spent over the years countless hours preparing discussion guides, and for each book that we have, and we have a whole filing system of like discussion guides that correlate with every single book that's in the jail library. So we've had incentive programs, but really, you don't really need an incentive program to read, because so many inmates just love the opportunity to read, and it's really their saving grace while they're incarcerated. So it's just, many of them attend school just to be able to utilize that jail library that we have. But trying to think what else I'm kind of leaving out, but really, you know, our program is strong. It's so strong. We have weekly meetings together as a team, and we just for communication purposes to kind of help and just come together for the best of our students. But, you know, we have a coordinate. So let me just kind of tell you how many people are on our team. We have Colin Walsh, who is actually, it's interesting. He used to be a jailer. He was a jailer for many years in the La Crosse County Jail. And he actually just in the last year switched over and applied for the opening of the jail coordinator, or for the project proven coordinator position. And he actually got it. And so it's kind of a cool story, because it's like, you know, he was in corrections, but now he's like on the other side of it, trying to help the inmates when they get out. So it's been a really powerful kind of connection there, because a lot of inmates know him through years of being incarcerated. So when they see that, it's just a really cool connection. So we have Colin Walsh, who's the coordinator, and then Dylan Motter is an instructor, but yet he's also kind of a case manager. He's one that they connect with. They connect with Dylan and Colin for jobs, and they're the connection people that, like, I, as the instructor, will give the inmates. I give their phone numbers, I give them their appointment cards, and they're who the inmates meet with when they get out of the jail. So we have Colin, Dylan. I'm Steph. I'm the instructor in the Monroe County Jail. We have Willa McKenzie, who is the instructor at the La Crosse County Jail. And then Tanya Von Tall is also an additional instructor, and she also helps connect with students when they get out too. And she's more of a liaison, like when they're in college classes, she would be that support instructor, you know, to kind of connect the students. So if they have any instructional questions, or like if they run into a barrier, she's going to help them, you know, kind of help them through that to keep going, to be successful in the college classes. So, so that's our team at Western, and we all support each other, and it's just a great thing, because it's just such a wonderful, life-changing job that I believe I have. I tell the inmates, and this is kind of, you know, mirroring what Matt and Kelly said, I tell the inmates all the time, some of the brightest, smartest, funniest people I've ever met have been in the jail. And I tell the inmates this all the time, you know, you guys, I learn from you every single day. It's made me a better person. It's made me a better mother. It's made me a better community member, just being able to have this job. So it's not just a job. It's more of like it's like, gosh, I'm getting paid to do this. You know, it's just one of those types of jobs. And I try to have that same kind of message when I go into the jail. Like I want the inmates to be able to find that passion and meaning in their lives. And, you know, it's one bad chapter doesn't need to define their whole life. And so, you know, we can all build from the experiences that we've had. And that's really our message, is how do we move forward, and how can we be better, and how can we utilize the strengths that all of us have to just make the world a better place. So that's, I guess, Project Proven in a really short nutshell. You didn't see my PowerPoint, but hopefully, you know, oh, I see a question. How long will okay. Oh, good question. So it started out as a grant. Okay. But it's no longer a grant anymore. So like, my position is not a grant position anymore. I'm fully employed through Western. Over the years, you know, we've begun, or we've just been able to have those positions as part of Western faculty. So now I'm a faculty, and I have been for a couple of years. But our specific, to answer that question, we are kind of still run under a grant, because our whole learner support and transition, which is like the pre-college programming. So it's like GED, HSED, you know, prepping to get into college classes, immediate supports, that the division that I'm a part of at Western is still grant funded. So we do use TABE tests to kind of track. And it's through the AFLA grant. It's a Wisconsin-based grant, or federal. I don't know these sorts of questions as well. But all I know is that our whole division is still operating. We have to track attendance hours. We have to utilize the TABE. So, but that's the way that our division is always run. But the Project Proven program itself is no longer run by, it's not a grant anymore. So per se, it's not like a specific Department of Education grant that we have to like keep reapplying for, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But how many inmates chosen to be part of the literacy class? Yeah, I don't know how you guys choose, but I know there is a system, right, Kelly?
Yeah, so one thing to point out is we were very fortunate to have Western Technical College offering regular daily kinds of lessons and this sort of outreach that goes beyond the jail. It is so important. Mm-hmm. We offer at UWL is we already have full-time jobs as faculty at UWL teaching 120 students plus per semester. And this is volunteer work that we do on top of our regular jobs as faculty at UWL. So we can't be in there all the time. Our program runs so that we're in there about every other week with a pair of us who offer these lessons. And so it's fantastic that we've got this regular daily presence that in our community that Western Technical College can provide. But the people who are chosen for our class, there's a fantastic program director at La Crosse County Jail, Mike Kiefer. Yeah. He looks at the inmates' literacy skills, their desire to be in a program where they're going to read poetry, because not everybody wants to read poetry. We want them all to, but chooses the people that he thinks are going to get the most out of it. And we usually have about, I would say 10 to 12 people per class. So 10 to 12 men and then 10 to 12 women when we go in. Matt, how else would you want to describe it?
No, I think that sounds very accurate, and yeah, Mike is great, the administrator. I think he has a pretty good feel for who would maybe be most interested, and most involved. And so he helps out quite a bit. Yeah.
Well, and I can speak to that too, Mike. So every jail usually has a point person that does the programming, helps and aids with the programming. and Mike at La Crosse County Jail is lucky enough to have like a sole position of a programmer. There is no Mike at Monroe County Jail. It's just a jailer that has volunteered, really, believes in the program, and we have a great relationship. That is a really important component, I would say, is to have a good relationship with the jail. So, following your P's and Q's, making sure you're wearing your mask, making sure that you're not bringing staples in and things like that. Being an instructor, it's not, and Kelly and Matt can speak to it, you gotta watch what you're bringing in, and you gotta watch what you have on you, and just following the rules. So I know that UWL has always had a great reputation, and going in and out of the jail. So it's not as easy. It's like you don't just go into the jail and teach. There's lots of things that I have had to get used to along the way to make these programs successful and have a good collaboration. So. Any other questions? Have you guys ever had, I have a question. Have you guys ever had an inmate who you've had in a jail literacy class come over and maybe take a class at UWL?
Not to my knowledge yet. We've had a few conversations with people who have expressed interest in doing so, and have and are hoping to follow up on those conversations. So, yeah, we're hoping it will be possible at some point that somebody might do that. Yeah. But it sounds like you have some good experiences, Steph, with people coming to take classes at Western, right? That's great.
Well, I think a big part, just from doing this for the years that I have, I think a big connecting piece to this whole thing is, really, we wanted, it's not just the programming in the jail. A real big goal is to, how do we continue this when we get out, and help you to, get back on track and be, so it's that connection piece when they get out has been huge. The advocate part has just been a really positive thing for a lot of it. Gives people hope. Mm-hmm. It gives a lot of people hope to know that they have someone to lean on, because many times when you're in jail, you've burned a lot of bridges. A lot of times people don't have very many people there waiting for them or calling them or mm-hmm. putting money on their books or whatever it is. So we could be, the instructors and the case managers, and that relationship that we build sometimes is oftentimes the only support that folks have. So yeah, Linda, did you have a question?
I am so impressed and so happy to hear that you're doing this for people. These people need something to strive for, and you're giving it to them. And it's so nice to know that this is happening. And yep. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, yeah. And, and this is what I always say. I say, people are like, the inmates will say, Steph, why would you want to do this? And I tell them, I go into the jail and I say these exact words. I feel so blessed to be able to do this, because you guys are going to be my neighbors when you get out. Your kids are going to be going to school with my kids, so I'm like tearing up, but it's true. So why would I not want that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great thing. I believe that I have a duty to do that. So mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, thank you. It's a wonderful thing. I'm sure it makes a big difference in many lives.
Yeah, it really does. And to be able to see that makes it all worth it. All those success stories that you see and how appreciative people are. It does help doing what you do every day, because it's not easy some days. It's not easy going and sitting with no windows as your classroom. It's not an easy place to go and deliver instruction. there's a lot of restrictions there. You can't have your cell phone right there, so yeah, it's but it's worth it. It's really worth it. So
it does a lot of things for our communities too.
Yep. I like to believe it does. Yes.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying so, Linda. And I'll just brag on us for a second. Kelly's too humble to do so, but we were recently recently received an award called, what is it, Kelly? The Eisenberg Award that was given from the Public Defender's Office, I think, in Madison.
Wow.
So we were just interviewed about that. And so I'm glad the program is getting some attention, and like you say, Linda, that the value of it is, spreading and the work that is possible there is getting some attention. It's not about us so much as the program. So we're happy to be involved in it. And
yep.
happy other people like Steph are doing such great work too.
And it's community support for these kinds of programs that really matters too. It's why that I wanted Steph to be here today as well, because there's a range of programs that you do need to know about as a community so that you can support them. And it's wonderful to hear, Linda, that you recognize how the work that Steph and her colleagues at Western doing do change lives, because they absolutely transform lives. And we hope that the programs that we're running can be a part of that too. But it really does take that kind of, full-time job of teaching there and to make all of that happen. So we're very grateful to be a part of it.
Great.
I think that's a great point to wrap it up. And thank you all so much. We are so grateful to you, Kelly, Matt, and Steph, for the wonderful work you're doing for our community and for being bridge builders for inmates. Thank you so much for dedicating your time and your talents to local inmates, the community, and for sharing the good work that you're doing with us. So thank you all so very much. We really appreciate it.
And my pleasure. Nice meeting you, Kelly and Matt and everybody else.
Likewise, and wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you all for coming. This is great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take good care.